This is the Hand of Merlin, a turn-based tactics RPG using rogue-lite elements that is currently in Steam Early Access. I wanted to take a look at this one because I love tactics RPGs in all their forms, having grown up with stuff like Final Fantasy Tactics and Disgaea, and of course loving XCOM. This is more similar to like an XCOM style arrangement than that, so obviously I want to take a look at any game that uses mechanics like that no matter what else they use, so here we are with the Hand of Merlin. It's using a pretty cool sort of combination of Arthurian legend and Lovecraftian cosmic horror, effectively, where Merlin is a sort of being from beyond time that has created an endless number of Arthurs on an endless number of Camelots and is trying to sort of protect the Grail so that it can protect the world from the encroaching darkness of the horrors beyond the stars, that sort of thing. It's a pretty neat idea, actually, and the writing in this game is actually very good as well. You'll start out by choosing a core, which represents the entity that's leading your forces. In this case, Merlin is the one that you start with, and the core has 3 concentric circles, each with 3 spells on it, and you unlock these spells as one of the game's form of meta progression that allows you to just, unlock these spells through multiple playthroughs, and you can choose 1 spell on each circle of the core, and you can unlock as many of them as you want, but you can choose 1 on each circle to bring into battle with you, so you can bring a maximum of 3 spells. These spells cost mana, which is represented by purple diamonds, and you will get very little mana throughout your adventure, so it's something that you've got to save up and use very sparingly. The spells are quite powerful, though. You can hold a maximum of 6 mana, and I mean, I've been through an entire map and only gained 1 mana from the whole adventure, so it's definitely something that takes a while to save up, but you can do so, and each spell costs an amount of mana equal to its tier, so that means the maximum amount you can hold is enough to get you 2 casts of your tier 3 spell. You'll then choose 3 heroes from across 3 different archetypes, your warriors, archers, and mages, so pretty classic, pretty standard. You don't actually have to choose 1 of each, you can choose any combination that you want, but you'll only start with 1 of each type. As you venture through the game and unlock different achievements and things, you'll unlock more different heroes under each class. And the differences between the heroes tends to be what 2 abilities they start with from their class, as well as what passive they have. Each hero has a different passive that they bring to the party, so of course you need to create a party of heroes that synergize well with each other. That actually makes the game have a pretty small party size. A lot of tactics RPGs and XCOM likes and everything like that, they usually have, at least 6 people, so 3 is actually a pretty small party to venture with. That means you'll be outnumbered pretty much all the time, so your strategy becomes very important to actually clearing the encounters efficiently without taking too much damage. Everything from the enemies to your characters has a red health gauge and a blue armor gauge. Armor basically is just an extended health gauge, effectively, except that it recharges after the battle is over for your characters and where your health does not. There's not really much of a difference between armor and health right now because there aren't very many abilities that treat them differently. There are a couple of things that do like extra damage to armor, or that only damage armor, or that do more damage if they're unarmored and stuff like that, but for the most part, there's not a whole lot that affects armor and health as 2 different resources. So until more of that stuff is put into the game, which I assume will happen eventually, you can basically treat armor as an extended health gauge when it comes to how the enemies work. Exploration uses a very Slay the Spire-esque world map with different nodes and different branches that you can go across to sort of, make your way across the map to the eventual end, where there is going to be a boss encounter at the end, and each node having different threat levels and different possible things that could happen there, from like choose your own adventure style stories to little side questy bits to a surprise merchant with a discount, or a surprise skill check where you can have like a certain percentage chance, depending on the characters that are in your party, to get some extra reward of some kind. There's all sorts of different encounters that you can come across on the world map, but of course a lot of them are also combat encounters. Combat uses a more XCOM style affair with your grid-based, cover-based combat, a 2 action point system where movement takes 1 and a lot of attacks also take 1, although you can of course use both to dash and extend your movement. Every character also starts with 2 skills and 2 unlockable slots. We'll get onto that in a minute. Every skill has a cooldown, by the way. Even your basic attack has a cooldown, so you cannot attack twice in 1 turn unless you have 2 separate attack skills that are off of cooldown. So you have to manage your cooldowns very effectively in this game, since everything has them, except for movement. And you can also, of course, use your mana to cast spells. That does not take your character's turn, but it's just something that you can do on any of your character's turns if you have the mana and you want to. Each character can also hold 1 artifact, of which you will actually start with 1, a grail of your choosing, and you can use that character's artifact on their turn as well, unless it's a passive artifact that is just activated by holding it. And as with a lot of XCOM-style combat scenarios, it's all about maneuvering and positioning. It's all about putting your characters in the right positions to not hurt each other, and of course to not get attacked by some sort of crazy AoE thing, which is usually telegraphed by big skulls on the ground to tell you to move out of the way. Covering each other properly so you don't get flanked too badly, and trying to outmaneuver your enemies and kill them. The formula will be pretty familiar to you if you've ever played the newer XCOM games, although with a lot less of a focus on ranged weapons since, it's medieval times. Although your archer does even have an Overwatch-style ability that allows her to stand still and reaction attack anyone that comes into range, although just like all the other skills in the game, it is on a cooldown, so you can't use it every turn while you're moving up. You have to kind of use it sparingly, which is interesting. There are also some skills that have a limited number of charges to them, so that you can only use them a certain number of times per combat, although with some of these skills, once upgraded, they often get some sort of choice that allows you to recharge them, like with a kill or something like that, and also sometimes you'll come across an artifact that actually allows you to specifically recharge your character's skills in combat. The enemies are pretty varied too, which helps, from various human enemies that you can fight that will tend to be able to do the same sorts of things that your characters can do, so there's something to watch out for, to the much scarier corrupted enemies that represent these sort of encroaching forces from beyond that are pretty crazy and have all sorts of various capabilities depending on the enemy. They can do crazy mortar attacks, they can just totally ignore terrain and fly around, they can do all sorts of things, and it makes them very unpleasant and pretty difficult to deal with each different one of them having its own unique set of circumstances that helps you take advantage of how to kill it, because they're all quite different and they're all very dangerous in different ways. Your armor, like I mentioned, does recharge after every combat, but health damage is permanent, so you have to either just happen upon a healer in one of the random events on a node or visit a town. There are various cities peppered throughout the maps that you can visit that represent places to rest. They have healers that you can pay to heal your party, they have shops where you can buy artifacts to equip your characters with, and they have blacksmiths. This is an interesting part of the game because every character has a set of gear, but you don't find gear. Instead, you upgrade it at the blacksmith, with each gear having a sort of branching set of 2 different upgrades that it can go through every time, ascending in price as you go. So each character's weapons and armors can be upgraded through these paths, and this is your main way of gaining power, really, although you can level up. That takes a while and is a bit of a different system, so this method of upgrading your character's equipment is the main way that you're going to make them stronger and able to survive and take on higher threats. As you complete various combat encounters and also various other encountery side story bits on the map, you will gain renown, and once you hit 50 renown, you can level up your team. That means everyone actually levels up at once, which is nice, which will slightly increase their statistics as well as allow you to unlock one of those other 2 skill slots we talked about, where everyone starts with 2, but there are actually 4. You can unlock the other 2 one by one as you level up. Each character's class has a sort of set of different skills that could possibly fill one of these slots, and every time you go to click one when you level up, it will give you a choice of 3 of all those possibilities that you then choose one of, so you can have eventually 2 more, and then once you have all 4 slots, so level 3 and onwards, when you level up, you'll instead be able to click one of the slots and actually upgrade the abilities, which is a really cool aspect because it doesn't just make the abilities stronger, it actually has every different skill has several different variations that it can get, even your basic attack skills, and every time you go to level 1 up, you'll be presented with 2 different sort of paths that it can take, 2 different forms of an ascended version of that skill that you can enhance it up to, so your characters will get significantly more powerful as the game progresses, as long as you're saving up gold to upgrade your gear and you're leveling up regularly to upgrade your skills. And your eventual goal is to, of course, make it to the end of each map and complete the boss encounter that's in that node, and then eventually make it to Jerusalem and deliver the Grail where it's supposed to go. And that's how the game works. That's how your average run will go, with, of course, the death of a character being permanent in each run, allowing you to sometimes recruit new characters as you go on to replace ones you've lost, usually in towns. And the main method of meta progression in between runs is to unlock more spells on your core, to unlock more cores, and to unlock more characters to start out with. So all in all, it's a pretty solid gameplay loop, really, although I do have some problems with how it currently works. So here we go. For one, I'm gonna guess, and I don't know this for sure because I haven't looked, but I'm gonna make an educated guess and say that I bet right now the developers are getting conflicting reports that the game is either way too easy or way too hard. And in my opinion, it's actually neither. It's actually too random, because it's very heavily reliant on RNG to its detriment. And this simply comes down to the way that the game is balanced. Right now, enemies gain armor very quickly. They quickly become extremely tanky. By the second map, they have over twice as much armor as what the starting enemies have, but your character's damage hasn't gained nearly as much in power, so they will very quickly outdo you by just being so tanky that it takes you forever to kill them, thus making sure they're probably going to scrape a little bit of your health away every time over and over again until you die, because the enemies just get so hard to kill. This over-tuning of the enemy's armor amounts means that there is only one dominant strategy in the game, one strategy that works every time, and that's to stack AP, stack free actions, your out-of-turn like reaction actions, and to stack attacks, just whatever attacks it doesn't matter what specific kind they are or what specifically they do, just more attacks because everything's on a cooldown, especially attacks that let you hit multiple times per turn. And I think that this is where those conflicting arguments are going to come from, because it's so heavily reliant on RNG. If you randomly get all of the gold that you need, and you randomly get all of the skills and all your skill draws for level ups that you need to make this strategy work, then you're going to breeze through combats with all the free turns that you'll ever need. But if you don't get what you need to make this work, then you're going to get crushed by enemies that are way stronger and tankier than you can ever be. Now, you guys know me, I don't just like to complain about something without also offering some sort of fix or something that I personally feel could actually improve the situation in some way. That way I'm not just complaining, but I'm actually offering something of value, hopefully. And I do have a couple of ideas as to how this could be changed. The one big obvious one is to not make enemies' armor amounts scale up so quickly. They don't need to get that tanky that quickly because you can never keep up with them unless you're following that one dominant strategy of turn attack stacking. So making them scale up a little bit less quickly will help to allow other strategies to be prevalent and actually allow more strategy in the strategy game, because there won't need to be just one that works and nothing else is good enough. Another thing you could do is to add an NPC, some sort of skill trainer, for instance, that you could find in encounters and also find in towns, that allowed you to pay gold to modify your skills. This would make the game less reliant on RNG, because if you pulled a skill that you didn't necessarily want, you could go to one of these trainers and pay some gold to choose a different one for that slot. You could also pay gold to have them upgrade skills in those slots in the same way that you can when you level up. It just allows you to do it more often and for gold. That way you could get more powerful more quickly and thus actually meet the enemies a little bit better, and you could scale up more quickly too. This would give you another thing to save up gold to do, and it would also still make leveling up important, because level ups allow you to do these things for free, and the only way to get your third and fourth skill would still be to level them up and unlock them. That way, these skill trainers could only affect skill slots that you already have unlocked. I think doing these things or something similar to them could help to diversify the possible relevant strategies in the game and make it a little more strategic and a little bit less about doing that one thing. And it would also help to lessen the reliance on RNG a little bit, sort of normalizing the difficulty a little bit more. Another thing I wanted to talk about is the spell system, because it seems like such a cool idea to me that isn't being used as well as I would like at the moment. I think there's room for a really cool mechanic here, but as it stands right now, it's only kind of cool in theory, because in practice, the system is so limited that you'll almost never be casting spells, because of course you want to save them for when you're about to die, so you'll only cast maybe, 4 or 5 spells per run. So it's a neat mechanic in theory, but in practice you use it so little that it almost doesn't matter that it's there. I also think that this mechanic is sort of important for the developers to, develop, because this is sort of the game's unique feature. Because if you compare this to something like Trials of Fire definitely comes out on top, so this game needs something else, a sort of unique spin, something to make it its own, and I think this magic system is exactly what it needs. It just needs to be fleshed out a little bit more, made into something a little bit more complex, more interesting, and I think I have an idea as to how to do that. I think it would be a cool idea to have these cores be sort of accentuating certain playstyles and have mana gain differ by cores. Like how you actually get mana depends on the core that you're using. So for instance, with the Merlin core, since it's the one that you start with, it's sort of the beginner friendly one. It has a lot of utility and defensive spells. It's your baseline, right? So having a sort of beginner friendly crutch-like aspect to it would make sense. So have it so that it has one mana that automatically regenerates. It only regenerates one. You can't gain more than that by regeneration. You have to find the rest of it, but you'll always have at least one mana to spend per combat, so that you can always cast one of your tier 1 spells every combat, and then when you move on to a node, it recharges that one space. This way you still have to save up for your higher tier spells, so it doesn't break the balance, but it allows it to have more of a presence in the game instead of just something that you almost never use. You could also, for instance, have a different core that doesn't regen mana like this, but instead gets mana per kill. So this core would be used for those that like to do as many combat encounters as possible. It would have a lot of offensive and damaging spells because it would be based all around killing. Maybe you can even get a mana return on killing enemies with it. And this would be the one for those people that take the playstyle of doing as many combats as possible. You could have another one, for instance, that can actually regenerate all of its mana. All 6 are regeneratable, but it can't regain mana in any other way. So any mana that you get on the world map instead changes into food. So that this particular core could be the one for explorers, the ones that like to visit as many nodes as possible and clear out as much of the map as possible before moving on, thus giving them an extra source of food for the mana that they can't get, and also allowing them to regenerate as they move on node by node. This is the kind of stuff I'm talking about, just making the core system a little bit more fleshed out, a little bit more integrated into different playstyles, allowing you to use it more often and allowing it to be more of a major part of the gameplay rather than like what feels like a small gimmick right now. So those are my views currently on the state of the Hand of Merlin and its early access campaign as it stands right now. I think there's a lot of room for improvement here. Hopefully I submitted some worthwhile ideas for people, but I also think that it's a pretty solid tactical RPG that does have a lot of staying power if some of these ideas get fleshed out a little bit more, some of it gets a little bit less reliant on RNG, that sort of thing. I think it could be a really fun time. So the link will be in the description below this video if you want to go check it out yourself. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.